It's very rare for me to cover other games on this channel, even rarer for me to cover other genres, really. But 4X Games is where it all started for me. So being given the opportunity to work with Paradox with a sponsored video for Millennia was great. Honestly, I was probably going to make a video anyway, because frankly, this game has been living rent-free in my head for the past 3 days. I've only had it for like 3 days, and I already have like 20 hours in it. So that being said, why don't I hop right in and show you what it's all about? We'll pick anybody, really, doesn't even matter. Adept probably is better if you're more familiar with 4X games, but if you're just really getting started, then Apprentice is great for learning the mechanics. There is a bit of a learning curve. You do have to pay attention to the tutorials. For the start bonus, these are pretty unbalanced in my opinion. Some of them are really good, some of them are just kind of okay. What I usually do is go with like a scout unit, or maybe I'll go with like a little bit of extra early food or production. But ultimately, it doesn't matter that much. Now, when I was asked to make a sponsored video, I had a couple options. They really said I could make any kind of video I wanted to, but you know, that's not an easy decision to make. Ultimately, I'm just going to give you a bunch of tips along the way while I play a mostly normal game. And of course, since we start with a scout unit, we can do a couple extra special things at the beginning. Then of course we have regular warriors. What we have is a move cost system, so you'll see this little thing in the top right of the portrait there. That's movement, so scouts have 30 and they expend that by going across rivers and whatnot. In any case, we can choose our technology. I personally like to go for scouting. Exploration is a really big thing in this game, mostly because of these little things over here, these tribal encampments. And naturally, we want to select something to build first. I usually go for scout cavalry. If we move a unit onto a tribal camp, we get a choice of what we want to do, and I think this is great. This game is all about choices, like everything's about choices. The events often give you choices. You even have a choice to go into like what age you want. We'll just take knowledge so we can get that scout quicker. Here we go. Sometimes we can also discover landmarks. If you want to discover a monument like this, a natural wonder, you just need to send a scout over there, and there will be a little button right here, discover landmark. Another thing to be acquainted with is all of your domains on the left side. These are incredibly important to keep track of. They do very powerful things and are also necessary for advancing some of the choices you can make later. So we start off as a tribe, and the game will recommend if you're a new player that you should start by spawning a settler. In my opinion, I usually like to go with this one to get +1 food in the homeland. It is pretty useful early game, it doesn't take that many points, and you can still build a settler later. Also, you'll see next turn that we're growing by 1 population. Because we have way more than enough food, population actually grows quicker. So there is an incentive in this game to supply your cities with an overabundance of food and all the other various things that it's going to need later down the line. Now, if we explore this landmark, we get 5 exploration XP and 10 combat XP. Here we go. It looks like we found our first barbarians. It isn't great for us to be sitting in the desert, so we're going to try and like move out of the way as soon as possible. But as you would expect with most 4X games, the early game is going to be a lot of exploring. Yeah, here we go. Here's a barbarian encampment. So scouting technology is what gave us that additional scout. Now, the next thing we're going to take, really, I would say, depends on what kind of resources you have around you. So all we really have to work right now is flax. There isn't a lot we can do with that. We could build a plantation. But the thing with flax is that when you work it, you only get 2 wealth. And 2 wealth is great and all that, but you can't really purchase units or rush production in the early game very much, so working this flax isn't going to be that helpful. Instead, I would say what we really want is probably workers, because that's going to give us a couple of improvement points, which I'll explain later on. It also allows us to build a clay pit for further improvement points. So terrain does have a defensive bonus. For instance, jungle is 1.4, and barbarians, the AI tends to want to attack you like no matter what. If you're just next to them, they will usually attack you, even when they probably shouldn't. So you can use this to your advantage to set up very good defensive positions. Now, here we go. Looks like we found another landmark, and we aren't interested in fighting these barbarians right now, so we're just going to move along. As for cultural powers, this is probably the most important thing you're going to find in the game, at least the early game. You build culture over time, it builds up the meter, and it gives you access to a couple different powers. This list expands drastically over time, so don't worry, it's far more than meets the eye. The first thing you should do is definitely create a town. The town system is something I don't think I've ever really seen in a 4X game. The whole thing is that you want to build it usually on the outskirts mostly, and that's going to encourage growth of your tiles in a specific direction. But also, towns can be specialized later on, so depending on the types of adjacency, you're going to get a lot more out of your towns. So for example, if I were to put a town, let's say like right here, it would be a somewhat decent farming town, because we have 3 grasslands here that we can replace with wheat fields, and every adjacent improvement that has to do with the town specialization location gives it quite a lot of adjacency bonus. Likewise, we could do the same thing here. We have grasslands here, and we have the potential for an olive plantation, which will also give us the adjacency bonus on top of also having this flax, which will do the same thing. So I think the best location for a town for us is going to be a town right here, and eventually, right now it's a level 1, but if we upgrade it to a level 2 town, we can change the specialization into a farming town, and it can get 4 adjacency bonuses. Another important thing about towns is that they increase the region level. If this was only region level 1, then we would be able to support a total of 5 population in this city. By having this town here, we've actually increased the number of pops that can exist within this city. Looks like there are a lot of barbarians up in the north here. We're not really interested in fighting anybody, so we're just going to keep on moving along. Now, we know that there is what's known as a minor nation here. They're basically city-states. They exist with one town and that's it. They don't usually grow very quickly, but they're very easy to incorporate into your own territory as vassals. But because there's a city here, and we place this town here, they are close enough to automatically build a road. You actually can use these roads to extend the amount that you can move. So it's really helpful to know exactly where things are. For example, yeah, we don't want to move in this direction anymore, but fortunately, we didn't spend too many points. Anyway, next thing we want to build is, I would say, kind of depends. We know that there's a barbarian encampment here, and we know that there's someone else here. There's another civilization. I'm not sure who that is. It might be Spain. And Spain, I believe, is militarist, if I remember correctly. So we might see a very aggressive neighbor early on, in which case it might be useful to get palisade walls, but I don't think in the next 10 turns we're going to have that many issues, so we're going to take town center. And here's another really helpful thing. These towns also act as basically cushioning for your cities. These towns also have units inside them. There's one city militia left with 47% of its health, so it's not very strong. We're definitely going to need to bring over some units. We actually have no way of repairing them for the time being, and when we do, it's going to be very expensive. So you do not want those to fall in the early game. Ah, beautiful. We found another tribal encampment. I think in this case, we want the government XP. So let's see here. Is this Spain? No, it's Egypt actually. Okay. Egypt might not be militaristic. In fact, they're reserved, meaning maybe we can be friends. That would be nice. Although, if you do spawn with a militaristic neighbor, it wouldn't be out of the question to attack them immediately. I have done that with a game where I spawned next to Zulu, and I was not having that. And yeah, another thing about the UI I'm not a massive fan of is that the diplomacy button is all the way up here. And they might have fixed this. Yeah, no, clicking on a country still doesn't open the menu. You have to click on the flag specifically. Looks like the defense of the city was successful. City militia's looking a little bit low, and it will take multiple turns for them to recover. So we're going to send the scout out, but we are going to move these guys in just to protect it. One really important thing, a big reason why we can't get rid of this barbarian encampment early game, is because barbarian encampments also come with their own units. They have the defenders and they have the walls. Walls actually count as units in this game. So when you build a wall, it's not just like a defense buff. It's not just adding health to the city. It's actually a unit that defends the other units inside. So that makes barbarian encampments actually kind of challenging early game to get rid of until you get archers. As you can see, there are a lot of them. We're on turn 8 and I think we've discovered maybe 3. Barbarians are kind of a challenge early game. Wow, we are very lucky to find this many landmarks. There is something really useful about these. Later on, if you discover enough landmarks before a certain age, then you actually get to decide to go into, I think it's either the Age of Monuments or the Age of Heroes, I'm not sure yet. Either way, for our first age, we have to go into the Age of Bronze, so we don't really have a choice, but keeping that in mind is kind of good. So we can just move next to that, explore it again. Now that we've finished the workers' technology, we can pick something else. Let's go with farming, that's fine. I would personally recommend, even though we could decide to build a clay pit right now, it might not necessarily be a good idea. We don't have a lot of population and you are going to need someone to work this improvement. I should of course probably mention what this is. These improvement points are pivotal. They're very important in the game. These tiles do so much more than you think they do. It's not just about collecting resources, it's about collecting like a bunch of goods specifically, and then creating like a production chain. So like you can get logs, which you turn into paper, which you turn into religious texts, and each of those buildings are going to require a tile and improvement points to build them. And most of the time, someone's going to have to work that tile. So that being said, we look at the amount of food we have in here and it's 7, right? We're getting 4 from working on grasslands. But if we decided to build a hunting camp right here, what we'll find is that hunting this deer now gives us 1 bone and 1 meat. and that meat is worth 3 food compared to 2 food, and that bone is going to be worth 2 wealth. So improvement points can drastically increase how productive your cities are. Another thing that's important to mention about towns is that they do encourage expansion where the town is. You can see the tiles around the town are very, very cheap to expand into. The number at the top is the amount of influence that needs to accumulate for you to claim these tiles from the city, and the small numbers are the division by which the influence is spread. So you see we have 5 influence in this city. It gets spread out along all of these tiles, and the cheapest ones, of course, are going to be expanded into first. This means like grasslands, scrublands, and anything adjacent to a town gets a really nice discount. Here we can pick up another tribal settlement, and we're going to use that for, let's say, more exploration XP. One of the reasons I want to do that is because I'm using this scout as kind of a defensive tool, right? We have 2 units on either side. Not a great situation to be in, but there is a tribal camp right there, and the AI will almost always attack you. Fortunately, we are in the forest. We do have a little bit of a defensive edge. So what we can do is we can decide to use a little bit of exploration XP, and we can increase the health back to full. I personally don't really think this scout is going to survive 2 attacks from these 2, so we're just going to press that right now. Seems like we've also found someone else who just grabbed one of the tribal camps I was looking for, and that has to be America, right? So clearly we have America to our south, Egypt to our north. This might be a little tricky for us. Wow, turns out those 2 attacks actually were more than enough to kill the entire scout, which I didn't expect. That's because of the way that combat works in this game. You have 2 meters, not just your health meter, but you also have your morale. Now, we've discovered farming, but the thing is, we don't exactly have many pops to work on tiles. The next thing we could do either, by the way, we could go into the next age, which is a decent idea if you want to start quick with innovation points. Might touch on that later, but I find what's usually more helpful is to go for defenses next, because that gives you an automatic archer in your homeland. With 1 archer and like 2 physical melee units, you can take down a barbarian encampment no problem. Now that being said, we're going to use our next, what we can do though is a Eureka. It's going to give us 5 knowledge, and it does get worse if you continue to use it, so use it once early on, maybe twice if you have an extra one and you have nothing else to do, but this should help us rush along our archer. Now because we have the opportunity, I am going to grab a settler for us. It doesn't mention it in the actual tooltip here, but when you spawn a settler, it does take one of your populations and turns it into a settler. So we're going to spawn in Hamburg. The population goes down to 2, but then again, because we have so much food, it's going to bounce back pretty quickly. Now, settlers, you're definitely going to want to protect along the way. So we're going to send them over here. These 2 merge into an army. We don't have a lot of really good spots. And one of the things about Millennia is that cities are gigantic. You really want to have a lot of space for them to grow. Otherwise, you're going to have maybe too much population, not enough for that to be used on. You're not going to be able to find enough locations for good cities that'll have good adjacency bonuses. Cramming your cities is really not a good idea. And I could expect Hamburg here to go like probably in a radius of at least like 6 tiles around it. This city can get massive. I wouldn't be surprised if, like, let's say we wanted to build a fishing town here eventually. They'll just move along to like all these coastal tiles out into the sea, all from one city. So space your cities out accordingly. I would say it wouldn't even be a bad idea to put it down to the scrublands, which sounds like a bad idea. You don't really see a lot down here. But the thing about resources in this game is it isn't just about map tiles. So eventually we can put down, like, let's say we want a lot of lumber, right? We have a lot of jungle here that we can turn into lumber. Almost like here, maybe, wouldn't even be a bad idea. You can build a lumber town here and it'll take advantage of 1, 2, 3 tiles, which is pretty average when it comes to most towns. Unfortunately, we can't get rid of the tropical rainforest and the Amazon rainforest. Just in case, I'm going to send these units over as well, just to make sure it gets protected from this particular encampment. Here we go. We have our first archer, which will be very useful. We're going to send them along kind of the same path. Now, we could enter the Age of Bronze, and I would say that is going to be our best option. Taking tribal elders is great and all that, but when you move into the next era, it actually makes it cheaper to research some of the prior stuff. You can also see other nations researching this stuff will also make that cheaper. But moving into the Age of Bronze is good because, 1, it makes it cheaper. Also, it gives us access to a lot more different kinds of research. Do you know what? At this point, because we lost that 1 scout, I wouldn't even mind building another scout. The main point is that you want to try and grab all those tribal encampments before everybody else. And I've seen sometimes the AI has been very, very close to them and they just never sent their scouts in that direction. So like, I'm talking maybe 3 or 4 tiles from some of their borders. I've seen tribal encampments still. So if you think the AI has taken all of them, just check anyway. There's a decent chance that there's going to be like one hidden in a little pocket that the AI just never noticed. Okay, so we've met the United States. We knew that they existed for a while. Turns out they are an aggressive AI, which is not great. Maybe we could figure out an alliance with Egypt. They might be willing to defend us, potentially. We don't have to be enemies with everybody, but those who are aggressive will usually try to make enemies with you. We also saw that this unit got attacked, which means there's probably a unit here, here, or here. So we're going to set the city down here for 2 reasons. 1, we're going to have that 1 tile radius as the immediate border. And 2, we can use that border to expand a town right here, which could get 4 farming adjacencies. Another thing is that once it expands a little bit over to the side here, let's say we grab this tile just through natural expansion, we can set down a second town eventually right here as a lumber town and get these 3. The thing is though, cities don't actually start off as cities. They start off as vassals. We don't actually get to control anything about this city. We're going to have to wait 15 turns for it to integrate to the point where we can actually turn it into a city just like Hamburg. That's why getting that first settler out early is really, really good. It looks like nobody's taken this yet, which is perfect. We will go ahead. And yes, I think we'll go ahead and take that knowledge. Seems there's also another civilization, Greece, and they were just about to take that, so we got there just on time. Now, personally, the way that I like to play this game is to try and increase the population as much as possible. I'm a huge fan of playing tall, having gigantic cities with tons of people, lots of production. It seems to be one of the best strategies, at least for me, and I haven't played that many games, so take that with a grain of salt if you want to. Now, what we could do, instead of having someone work this grasslands tile, is we could build a farm. A farm, let's say like either here or here is fine. Don't build a farm onto these places. Do not make that mistake. I have made it myself. If you're really concerned about what you should build here, you should just hover over each one and it'll tell you that it will work the olives, or in this case, it will work 1 wheat. Even though there's no wheat here, it will turn this into wheat. But a farm does that with any tiles, so if we decide to build a farm right here, we will get wheat. And that wheat is more useful than just working a regular grasslands tile. 1 wheat, of course, gives you 3 food. And wheat can also be turned into other things like grain and then bread. Goods production and goods supply chains are a really big thing in this game. And since we're, not technically at the maximum amount of food we could have for double the population growth, I think it might be a decent idea to build a food stockpile. Greece is diplomatic, that's lovely. We would love peace with Greece for as long as possible. If you're wondering, none of the individual countries necessarily have any kind of buffs or debuffs. I think some of them sort of gravitate towards different archetypes of behavior. So every time I've seen France in a game, they've been militarist, same with Spain, same with Zulu. Now here's something to learn about warfare, which might be different than you're used to. Archers do not act as ranged on map units, but they do act as ranged on the battlefield. So if we decide to have a fight here, and yeah, I'm not really a big fan of the animations. Yeah. Anyway, archers stay in the back, they don't take physical damage, and they just launch attacks. Also, very helpful against anything with walls, like a barbarian encampment, because they can actually shoot over those walls. They don't always, but they can. And when they do, you can delete the units inside and then just destroy the walls. Yay! Looks like we're in the new era. The Ottoman Empire has brought us into the Age of Bronze. First Age is very important. It allows you to take your traits. We actually haven't gotten into the Bronze Age, by the way. Everybody has to go into the next age. So if we check, we can see that Greece is in the Age of Bronze, the US is in the Age of Bronze, and of course we know the Ottoman Empire is in the Age of Bronze. The fact that the Age of Bronze has been reached means that a bunch of things have been changed in the world. Barbarians can spawn barbarian warlords. So far, we just see regular barbarians here, but warlords can now spawn and they are much stronger. We ourselves have now entered the Age of Bronze. It gives us new domains, diplomacy and engineering, both I will touch on in a second. We also unlock our national spirit and the trade system. Now, national spirits are what really sets this game apart in my opinion. We're a little late to the table, so some of them have already been picked. In fact, wait a second, how many countries are in the Age of Bronze right now? We know of at least 3 other countries in the Age of Bronze, and yet surprisingly, only 1 domain has been picked. Kinda weird. It means that I think all 3 of them have taken mound builders. I really like mound builders, they're really good. They're generally for building really tall, having a lot of population, which requires a lot of sanitation. But you can go through each of these and figure out what you want to pick. They all have their various different specializations. Like wild hunters allow you to hunt down like stuff outside your borders. So you can spawn one of those units, send it over here. It can bring back meat and bones to your capital without having to have pop work that tile. And the best part about this is that these are the ones that can be picked in age 2. You see up here we have age 4, age 6, and age 8. You get to pick from a giant list of these, and you can match them however you want to. What's really important to keep in mind before you pick one is what is available to you and what do you really want to play as. So for example, if we wanted to pick like God King Dynasty, we would have a couple of issues because we don't have a lot of hill tiles, and so we're unlikely to really be building stone cutters or quarries or anything like that. And God King Dynasty is all about that kind of stone and quarrying production. So since we don't really have, like, we have a few hills here, 3 I suppose. Over here we have 1 for marble, but that's really, it's not going to find a lot of use. If you're on an islands map, ancient seafarers are really good. If you have like a bunch of forest and jungle around you, naturalists are good. I might pick up wild hunters because we have a lot of scrubland, and scrubland is kind of improved a little bit. Like we reduce the cost of expanding into scrubland. We can also get elephants, which I think are in scrubland. We get improvement points from bones, which is good. The only thing is that we don't really have, even though we have a lot of scrubland, we don't really have a whole lot of actual wild game here. The good thing about bow hunters is they don't need to be inside your borders, so we could send one all the way over here just to get some game, maybe even all the way up here. In my opinion, I'm a huge fan of the mound builders, but I've already played them before and a bunch of people have clearly taken mound builders, so we're gonna pick something else. If you want to raid a bunch of people without conquering cities, raiders are good. If you want to conquer cities, warriors are good. Mound builders are, if you have like a lot of grassland around, it's really good because the mounds that you build require grasslands just to build them at all. Unfortunately, we are kind of in a grassland dead spot where we have mostly scrubland and a few patches of grassland that are very valuable for farming, so we don't want to waste those on mounds. So wild hunters it is. And of course, we can start off, because we have a lot of exploration experience already, we can just grab a bow hunter. Again, these guys are kind of cool. You just bring them into a tile like this, and well, you have to have movement points, but then you can just start harvesting it for free. Okay, so we can do this. We can drag home some food for us, which will make it faster for us to grow this population. We can also pick up another tribal reform. We'll go with knowledge. And these units are ready to avenge our fallen scout. You can see in combat the archers sometimes reach a little bit over the walls and they can deal damage directly, while the melee units are kind of forced to just attack. And you don't always get to finish the battle. Sometimes we'll just have to go back in a second time. Ah yes, the game has reminded me to explain ages again. So because we're in the age of bronze, it is possible for us to fall into a crisis age. This is why you don't really want to fight other countries that much early on, because, well, you can fall into the age of blood simply by attacking and conquering other countries. Alternatively, you could also go into the age of heroes. Because we've discovered 3 landmarks, we can make that happen. And we do want to be in the age of heroes. There are a lot of really cool things you can do with that. So that being said, it's in our interest to be the first person to research the next age. Everybody will have to go into the age of heroes if we pick it first, but if somebody else researches another age, I'm pretty sure we get locked out of choosing the age of heroes. We're gonna grab community as our research because we definitely want kilns. And before we get kilns, because this population is now satisfactory, we're gonna go ahead and put down a clay pit. This can only be put down on grasslands, and of course we're gonna turn this into a farming city, so we don't want to put it down here. That's gonna give us 1 clay good, which is going to give us 1 production and 1 improvement points. Might be a little tough to see that. That's another thing about this UI, is I find it's a little bit small with the text. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be a way to increase the text size. Anyway, let's attack this encampment again. We can just skip all the way to the end where we have destroyed the walls, but we haven't destroyed the unit, unfortunately. So we're going to have to wait another turn. Well, this could be a problem for us. That is quite a lot of units, and we don't really want to get caught here. We're gonna guard, allow these units to reinforce a little bit, and then hopefully we're gonna survive. Another big problem is that, yeah, we have another warlord here. These are individual units. You see it's just 1 guy, but they're very strong. wrong. So we should probably move this guy out of this tile, bring him back to the city, and see if we can help with the defense. There we go. Looks like we managed to entirely defeat the warlord simply by having all of our city militia attack him alongside the archers. Not bad for a defense. We can send this guy back over, and then he can start working on food again. Now, for these guys, we have had a tough battle for sure. We've lost one of our units. We're probably going to lose another one of our melee units, and then our ranged units are kind of out of luck. Big problem. So, I don't do this lightly, but I think we're going to take our Warfare XP. We're going to hire some volunteers in here. These volunteers can move automatically. It's just going to be one unit. And what we're going to do is we're going to stand across this river crossing. We should still get a defensive bonus. We're just going to send this guy in there and make sure that, well, you know, hopefully nobody dies. Remember what I said about checking around just in case? Well, Egypt somehow missed this tribal encampment, and that's going to be ours. Now, we could decide, go ahead and build another town right next to this city. The problem is that that town is not going to be very helpful. Until this city reaches 5 population, it really isn't going to be helpful at all. Vassals do give you some things, but it's really not a lot. So until it's integrated, it's really not the best option. I think what we want to do instead is either Eureka, and since this is the first time we're using it in the Age of Bronze, it's still going to have its full power, and it's actually worth 3 turns, which is pretty decent. There we go, we were attacked, and miraculously we did survive. Yeah, it looks like the warlord decided to attack our other unit instead. So thankfully, we could, if we wanted to, push forward, but I think the best thing we could do for now is maybe take a moment to rest. And the only thing I'm really concerned about with this city is that we have kind of a lack of production. We do have 1 forest we can use for logging, and eventually we'll get 2 hills we can use for copper to make more ingots and other things, but otherwise we don't have a lot of raw production. We don't have a huge forest, we don't have a massive hill range or mountain range or anything. Working on this work camp is going to be pretty important. Another thing that might be a good idea is actually changing this warband into a leader. Leaders buff your entire army with tactics stat. Tactics are pretty important, and none of your regular units really have any tactics, so they have just enough XP to bump that up into a leader, and this guy will just give us 1 tactics. I think, of course, the best place to recover a unit would be in the city. That would make sense. Now that we're done with community, we can pick something else. I think belief would make the most sense. Now we can pick up another reform. We definitely do want an additional improvement point. That is very helpful. Okay, it seems like someone wants to attack us. Now we could wait for them to attack us, and I think that would be better. Of course, we don't get any defensive bonus, but we also get to fight with tons of additional militia. So that would be ideal, I think. Perfect. All right, let's go back in. So Hamburg is now 6 population, but now that we have needs in this city, it means we're gonna have to build some housing. Housing comes in the form of dwellings, first and foremost. Eventually you get much better housing, but first it's going to be dwellings. Now, we're not gonna worry too much about that right now. It's going to be another 9 turns before we really need to build that. What we can do though, because we have the population now, is build a kiln. Clay, of course, gives you 1 production, 1 improvement point, and bricks give you double that. So you might say, why not just build another clay pit? Well, clay pits can only be built on grassland first and foremost, and also by building a kiln you get 1 engineering XP for working it, and we're going to want to do that to do a couple things. Namely, we can use that engineering XP to build up our town here to level 2. Once it's level 2, we can specialize it into a farming town and immediately take advantage of this tile to get additional food and, I believe, wealth. Now this time we'll avenge our fallen scout. What's interesting is the battle doesn't actually stop after you kill the defenders. The walls are still there and you have to like break your way in. It's kind of weird. So we're actually gonna have to wait another turn just to break down the walls. Now we've researched belief, we've researched community. I think the last one that would make any kind of sense for us would probably be officials. Spawning that envoy is pretty important. Envoys are what allow you to vassalize these cities. So now we have enough improvement points to build a dwelling, and we're gonna slap that down, let's say right here is fine. Now our needs are further met, so we can keep growing this city. Unfortunately, it looks like Persia is going into the Age of Iron. It means we might lose our opportunity to enter the Age of Heroes. That'd be pretty unfortunate, but not the end of the world. Now, let's clear out the encampment. You get to pick between 2, sometimes 3 options. We don't really have a big use for money at the moment. I still don't think we can rush anything in particular, maybe culture. But the big thing for us is trying to improve all of our tiles. The last thing you want is just a bunch of people working on unworked tiles. Unless maybe you choose naturalist, in which case maybe that is a good idea. Nobody's working working this tile. I would kind of prefer if they did, but we're going to go ahead and grab a forester, slap it down here. One person's going to move over to this tile to work on it. That's going to give us 1 log, which is 2 production. And then when this is done, we'll have even more production. Looks like Greece actually went with raiding. That's not good for us. It's interesting that they're diplomats, but they went with the raiders. That's not very diplomatic of you. Perfect. Okay, let's go ahead and grab this right next to an encampment. We're okay. Oh, perfect. I get to show off a new mechanic. I think the ideal move would be to take knowledge, but just to show off the mechanic, we're going to take innovation. So innovation is a very slow burn resource. You find it in the top right here. It accumulates to 100. It always accumulates to 100 no matter what. And once it does, you get some kind of unique thing, or you can just get a lump sum if you don't like what the unique thing is. And I find that they are incredibly cool. Like last run, I picked mound builders and I got something that was specifically for the mounds. So maybe by taking wild hunters, we can get something unique for our hunters, or maybe whatever we can find in here. It's going to take us 10 turns, and then when you do get an innovation, the meter resets and it reduces the generated amount to 30%. So when we get the innovation, this will drop to +3. It means you don't really want to stack it too much because you're going to get diminishing returns compared to if you just wait and stagger the bonus. We have news from abroad. Egypt and Greece are now at war. Makes a lot of sense though. Greece picks raiders. Raiders are very numerous and very strong. If you look down the raider path, if you get the game, raiders, you get to spawn like 2 raiders every single time you go through like one of these. So like you pick one up, you get 2 raiders. You go to the next one, 2 more raiders. And it just keeps on going for the entire tree. So Greece could actually be a real threat. On the bright side, this means that Greece is probably not going to attack us. They're already at war with a different country, so we're not really in their crosshairs. It also means that Egypt, although they weren't very aggressive to begin with, is also probably not going to attack us. Now, that's good because we want to improve our next city, Essen. We can fully integrate it now, which is always a good idea in my opinion. Well, depending on your government form, which we'll take a look at later. Anyway, we can go and grab this bonus now. We only get 1 culture per turn now that we've integrated another city, so getting 10 culture is not a bad idea. This means next turn we can build a city right here. And that city is going to be helpful again because we have 4 tiles which can be used for farming. Well, that's not a good thing. Build the city, immediately barbarians come in. Okay, how are we going to deal with that? Frankly, it's going to take multiple turns to even get there, but we do have something up our sleeve. While the city militias will probably be enough to deal with these guys, they are seasoned barbarians. They're a little bit stronger. Now, we have just enough warfare points to grab some volunteers. That's good for us because, well, we have no one defending the city, so anything is better than nothing. Right, we do have a culture ability. Okay, I did mention the fact that we want to turn this into a farming area. Looks like that was enough to defeat the barbarians. That's good. Okay, this city has tons of production now, which is perfect. We can use that to build a lot of the stuff that we avoided early because they wouldn't have been very helpful. But now that we have the extra points, we might as well. I think starting with a crane might be a decent idea. That'll give us more improvement points. Now, I did mention how we created wheat here, right? Well, the thing is, I think what we're going to want to do is we're going to build a plantation on the olives. That's going to give us some wealth, but that's not really what we're after. Whenever possible, we're going to end up building a press. And a press is really good because, well, first of all, the fact that this is an olive tile means that we're going to get 1 olive out of that. Also, if we decide to build a plantation on this flax tile, it's going to fill out the other requirements, right? We're looking at either 2 flax or 2 olives, or 1 of each is fine. And then we can get 2 cooking oil, which is an insane amount of food. We're going from 4 food, 2 on this tile, 2 on this tile, to 16 total food, which is massive. So that is a pretty good idea, I think. Okay, yeah, it does look like Egypt got here first, which is very unfortunate. I think what we'll do is go for the next one above. Okay, let's see. Persia has brought us into the Age of Iron. Okay, so what can we do then? We can only enter the Age of Iron now. The Age of Heroes is now locked. That's okay. We're still going to want to enter that era to make these much cheaper to research, and, you know, a bunch of other things, of course. And here's what I was talking about. Just a few tiles from their capital. They never bothered to take the tribal camp. Now, we're going to use that, and, well, something I really wish I could do is really look into these menus while I have this open, because I don't know if I want exploration or if I want government. I know I want government, but I know I also don't want it yet. I want to wait approximately, well, 2 turns because of the way that innovation works. So we are going to take government. And while we could go for tribalism reformed, that's going to give us innovation. And innovation, as I mentioned earlier, is very good in a slow burn, less so all at once. So now that our crane is built, I think we want to move a little bit further into our specialization, wild hunters. Although it has been useful in a limited capacity, we can do more by building a lookout that gives us exploration XP. Okay, so we have our envoy in place. It really is just as simple as pressing a button. Now we own this, and that's it. Now, I imagine it's going to make some people very angry. In fact, I predict we're gonna be on Greece's bad side, which is maybe not the best for us. But they are at war, and it seems like there's a little bit of unrest in their capital, so who knows what might happen. In any case, we finished this off, and of course, right as I'm at 10% chance of getting the innovation. We're still going to take the innovation, even though it's not as good as it could be. We'll still get +6 per turn after this innovation anyway, so I can live with that. Anyway, we have enough improvement points, so let's go to Hamburg, and we can build a press. Now, the neat thing about the supply chains is that while we don't have 2 olives, we don't actually need 2 olives. We can just get the first olive to turn into oil, and then as soon as we're able, we can build the second plantation with flax, and again, presses can take flax or olives, so that is no problem. I took a short break to log another 8 hours into a new playthrough, so I'm a little bit more acquainted with the adept difficulty now. All I have to say is, I actually fear Greece a lot more now. Here we go, our first innovation. So we get to choose between getting 300 gold immediately, which is a large amount of gold. Later on, I find that the gold becomes less and less valuable, but it's always worth checking to see if maybe the gold is worth more than whatever this is. In this case, we can get +1 bonus culture from meat goods, which is good for us because we're going to have a lot of meat goods. Whenever we hunt wild game, that's going to be meat right there. And additional culture will allow us to establish more cities, so that's a good idea. So in this city alone, we have 2 meat, which not only grant 3 food, but now +1 culture each. And imagine if we make a whole lot of bow hunters and send them up north to these areas, we could probably make a lot of culture. Here's something that's important to note. Unrest. Unrest can creep up on you if you're not paying attention. Mostly it's going to be from the number of regions. I find later on in the game it's going to be mostly from population. If you declare war on somebody, your unrest will increase steadily because of war exhaustion. It is possible to game this by being the defender and extending the war indefinitely to cause your enemy to just collapse. I have used that once or twice, and maybe it could use a little bit of rebalancing. But the easiest way for us to take care of this problem we have is to simply get some city guards. That's the point of the city guards, that's what they're made for, so we might as well use them. Also, it only costs 4 to rush this building, and I think that's a good idea considering we only have 2 productions, so anything we get extra after this isn't going to be worth much. So I think what this city needs is probably a bit more production. We have pretty decent food capabilities, at least for the short term. And for us to get anything productive, we're either going to have to expand into a forest tile like this, or into this hills tile which also has marble. I was going to build a lookout, but I think actually a dolmen would be more useful. It gives us an immediate amount of influence, which allows for border expansion. It also gives us 3 influence per turn. Right now we have 5. So that should allow this city to reach more productive tiles much quicker. If you haven't noticed, different tiles have different costs to expand into. So for example, deserts are kind of disincentivized by being super high cost. Same thing with like marshes and deep forest, mountains in particular. And yes, I definitely should have gone ahead and grabbed reformed tribalism. It costs 25 government points. It'll give us another 10 innovation plus 2 culture. You know, I've had myself in the bottom right corner the entire time because I figured you guys wouldn't really have to see this part of the menu that much, but maybe some of you would like to see that. It's not very interesting, but just in case, I can move myself out of the way. Okay, we have enough engineering points, and I think what I want to do with them is expand this town to level 2. Now realizing that I'm blocking stuff, I'm gonna put myself back. Okay, so we can change the specialization. Of course, this will be a farming town, and it's going to generate additional food because of the adjacency bonus. Now, I think simply being a town is what gives you this wealth access, but being a farming town specifically is what's giving us more food. It also might be a good idea to just create a plantation here. Here we go, we're in the Age of Iron now. Gold and iron will show themselves on the map. We can also pick a new government. And art has become available. Now, the US, not very happy with us, that's fine. We're just gonna move our troops. Right, that's a valid complaint, actually. So what have we discovered? We know that there's some gold here. We know that there's some iron here. This is very helpful for us. In fact, I foresee maybe, well, it depends on how I go about doing this, but maybe even a mining city wouldn't be bad here. just for these 2 tiles. It's not going to be super productive, but we don't have a lot of other options for cities other than a coastal city right here. Anyway, it did mention something about getting a new government type. Well, we have a few options. We could decide to have a violent revolution, which will increase chaos. Not a big fan of chaos. It becomes much more manageable later on, but early game chaos can be really destructive. You can pay it off if you have enough money, but money is kind of hard to come by early game. So the other option, and the far preferable one, is to simply have a peaceful revolution. We're going to have to wait 4 turns, but then we can do that, and it is always better to change your government type as soon as possible. Now, we are in the Age of Iron, which means that if we go back and research something, it will be a little bit cheaper. And I think what we do want is mining, actually. I did mention the marble, so hopefully when we grab that, we can be a little bit more productive. And it looks like Greece is actually on the warpath here. They've broken down the walls of the Egyptian capital. It's under siege, so I have a feeling it might fall, and that would not be good for us. But we can use this opportunity while Egypt is distracted. We could actually decide to take this city ourselves. I kind of want to, right? I know I'm bringing these guys down here, but we have a perfect opportunity. Plus, the city's almost entirely undefended. It's just 3 city militia. And now that we can upgrade our archer to a crossbow using a little bit of warfare XP, we should be able to take care of that city militia very easily. To briefly explain combat a little bit, there are different types of units. So, for example, we have a line unit as our leader, and our warband is also a line unit. Now, our crossbow is a ranged unit, and it has 2.5 times attack versus line units. City militia are also line units, so having archers or crossbows are really good early game because they sit in the back and they deal extra damage to the majority of units. Now that we have enough points, we'll pick up something else from wild hunters. I think we'll go for elephants just to see where maybe they might be. Oh, here we go. That's actually a lot of elephants. Okay, so hunting them actually gives us exploration XP. That's interesting. So working these tiles would be a good idea. Would the bow hunter work for this? I'm not sure. I think we can at least give it a shot just to see. The answer is surprisingly yes. Okay, that's really good for us. This city already has more than enough food, so we might as well grab a few extra exploration points. And we're gonna get a few tiles soon. But for the time being, just to make sure this city grows as fast as possible, we're gonna build another dwelling. And hunting camps are very cheap for us, so we're gonna put another one down here. Anyway, if we want to, we could rush our culture, which would allow us to, of course, grab our peaceful revolution quicker, but I think we're okay. In fact, I might even consider setting up a new city. Problem is that we don't have a lot of good candidates. Over here would make for a good city, but it's like right next to the Americans. It's gonna be kind of tough to get in there, especially if we need to defend it. Well, nothing ventured, nothing gained, I suppose. Instead of down here, though, I'm thinking closer to up here. I don't think Egypt, after being torn apart by Greece, is going to have much to say about this. It seems actually rather cheap for us to finish off the dolmen, so we're just gonna rush this, and we're gonna start working on a city guard. Seems this region does have a little bit of unrest. When we have the revolution, we could decide to say no, or we could just have the peaceful revolution, meaning we can change our government into either an imperial dynasty or a kingdom. Kingdoms are very good if you have lots of vassals. You can see spawning settlers is much cheaper, spawning envoys is much cheaper. It's about creating a lot of vassalized territories, but not a lot of integrated territories. From a pure statistics standpoint, that is a worse thing to do. But being a kingdom makes up for that because you have this button here to give you wealth based on a vassal's population and a prosperity. And stacking that with this means you can do that fairly regularly, just taking a lot of money and a lot of knowledge, and it's pretty decent in that regard. Personally, I like to go with an imperial dynasty though. The palace does a couple of useful things. It's much more focused on having fewer vassals, generally fewer cities, but really stacking those cities high. So for example, getting knowledge from every 5 population in the palace region, which is your capital. Same thing with production, increasing the region level, getting more food, and the palace itself has a couple of benefits. So that's what we'll select. Building the palace is a bit weird. I'm not sure if it mentions this, but you have to build it through this menu. It's kind of odd. It's like the only building that you have to build through this from what I remember. Maybe there are different ones I haven't seen yet, but yeah. I have a feeling if we do settle up here, it might make either Greece or Egypt a little bit angry. So what I'm going to do to prevent getting killed is just going to build palisade walls to begin with. We do have the lookout, which is a defensive unit. It will actually fire upon enemies in battle, but a wall will just defend your units entirely, so that's pretty good. Okay, this is a decent spot. Now, I can't just sit here and lament the fact that this city has barely any production without, you know, increasing its production. So we can build a clay pit right here, and then as soon as we're able, we'll also build a kiln. In fact, it might not even be a bad idea to just grab this first public improvements, because later on this becomes less and less useful as you get more and more improvement points, and also the cost increases each time you pick it. So that only costs us 10, the next one would cost us 12, but it still only gives us 10 improvement points. And since we don't gain a whole lot, this is kind of helpful. It means in 2 turns we can build a kiln instead of like in 4. Here we go, another innovation. Perfect. So either 450 gold or +1 bonus arts XP from bricks goods. Art XP is okay, but the thing is I tend not to like using bricks later on, meaning I don't think this is going to be very helpful for us. So instead we're just going to grab the money. And with that money we can rush things, which might be more helpful. So we can finish off the encampment, and with that encampment we should probably build another bow hunter or at least some kind of unit. And we've also finished off mining. Okay, perfect. We're going to grab discipline just to make sure we don't get crushed in any potential war. Now I get to explain pioneers, because we just got one from our last tech. Pioneers allow you to establish outposts, which are basically little extensions of your territory, but not quite. You can use it to be kind of mean to the AI and block off their expansion. So if I put a pioneer like right here, it would claim all of the tiles around it, meaning that Egypt couldn't expand this city down here anymore. That is the rudest way to use it. Let's say you wanted to make a farming town for Dusseldorf or something. You could put an outpost here. You can actually gather these resources, bring them back to Dusseldorf without having to work them with pops, and then later you can integrate that outpost just like here with a town. So that being said, I think it actually would be a good idea for us to go and just simply maybe secure this region over here. Let's also build a kiln in this region. It seems our power is actually higher than the Americans. If given the opportunity, it wouldn't even be a bad idea to go to war and maybe take a city over here. Philadelphia would make for an excellent city. We have enough government points, so let's construct our palace. I think technically we could build it over here, but we're going to build it in the capital. The palace itself gives us 4 unrest suppression, 3 government XP, and 4 influence. For reference, we used to have only 6 in this city. That also means that we have doubled our government XP income, so it is a good thing to build early on. So what we're going to do, I'm not sure if it's going to be a good idea, because we're barely stronger than Egypt, but I think we're going to declare hostilities first. It's the one step you have to take before war, and it also gives someone a little bit of a chance to react, because of course we can't send 2 diplomatic options back to back. We're going to have to wait, I think, another 3 turns before we can declare war. Now, the city, again, still not very productive. 13 is decent, but that's because it has some overflow from the last thing that we built. We do want things to be built faster, so I think we're going to build a forester here. It's not ideal because we will eventually have a foresting city here, I think, just to grab these 3 tiles. But until we can do that, this is a good start. Greece and Egypt ended their war. Well, that's kind of awkward for us. Right as we're about to go to war, huh? Ah, that belongs to Greece. I see. That is an important thing to keep in mind. Let's just sit back for a moment. Greece has a lot of unrest from being at war, so they're not going to attack us for quite a while. Oh look, there it is again, another tribal encampment that the US decided for whatever reason to not check out. Here we go, we can build an outpost. It is currently linked to Hamburg. If you wanted to change the region, you could, but it can only be changed to cities which are not vassals. And yes, it seems like Greece is not going to be very happy with this. I think I've trapped their army on this side, which is bad because they're trapped in here with me. Anyway, we have spawned another bow hunter, so we're going to send them this direction. And we have another one over here. We're going to do the same thing with these elephants. Fortunately, the bow hunters also double as pretty decent units. They're not as powerful as crossbows, but as far as having something to defend with, they're pretty decent. So the US is threatening us. This means they're almost definitely going to go to war. That's a problem. We don't have a lot of units. So to fix that problem, let's just swap away from building a temple, and we're going to build a somewhat decent army. The type of composition you're going to make is going to vary, of course, depending on the ages, because right now we can only have, well, now we can have 4 units, and eventually you can have 5, and I think maybe 6 later on, and maybe even more. Now, what I usually like to do in early game depends on who I'm fighting. I'm willing to bet that the US is probably going to have a lot of line units, but probably not a lot of ranged units. But if they do, we are going to want something to take care of that. All of that is to say that the type of army we're going to want to make is going to have a leader, 2 ranged units, and a cavalry. That's what I usually like to grab. Later on, I like to have maybe maybe another line unit, or if it's going to be something for sieges, I'll grab like a catapult. But just for now, the most important thing we can have is anti-line units, which means we're going to start with a crossbow. For our next technology, I don't think we actually need shipbuilding. Instead, we're going to look at infrastructure. This is incredibly important to grab. This one city over here currently has enough sanitation. Once you have 11 population, you're going to need sanitation. Problem is, if you don't have enough sanitation and you're in the correct age, that being the age of iron, then you could fall into the age of plague. It's very easy to fall into this age. I've tried my best in all of my playthroughs to avoid it, and successfully so far, but crisis ages are a good thing to avoid, especially when you have very militarist enemies around you like Greece. A crisis age would allow everybody to attack everybody. We're always at war with everyone, and that's not fun, unless you want it that way, in which case, be my guest. But for our playstyle this time, it doesn't suit us. Infrastructure will allow us to build aqueducts, which will give us sanitation. The other thing we could do is buy a midden. This will give you sanitation as well, but of course it costs quite a lot of improvement points, right? And it takes up a tile. We don't really have that many tiles to work with. Infrastructure will make that a little bit easier on us. We can also pick up the next Wild Hunters thing. I think it'll just be this for improvement points, and then we can use some improvement points already to just go ahead and build like a dwelling. Maybe here's fine. I am willing to actually rush this bow hunter because we might have to build a second army here, and I think it would be much better if we had, you know, something to fight with. First, we're gonna build a spear, and then crossbow, then chariot, then another spear. Okay, what do we have? Diplomacy. That would not be a bad idea. Okay, we're gonna have to fight Egypt. This is the rudest thing you could ever do in any game, because you can't actually burn cities down. You can turn them into vassals, but you can't burn them down. But anyway, a farm improvement, getting more food, that would be nice. Speaking of farms, we could build another one right there. Now we could use our culture power, and I think I could save this, actually. I could wait, and then when America attacks us, we can use this, which I think is a little bit broken maybe, but you can instantly create a truce with all of your active wars. You can just cancel them. It would be very helpful for defending us for at least a few more turns. That being said, I think I want the Americans to fight us. I did mention earlier that when somebody attacks you, they start gaining war exhaustion. Well, what that means is if you're able to defend yourself, you can cause the enemy's productive capabilities to tank significantly, meaning eventually you can just outproduce their units. You can create more units and eventually start winning the war. So defensive wars are some of the best wars you can fight. And that being said, we're going to use our culture ability for, I think, Eureka. 25 knowledge would be multiple turns of knowledge, and finishing off infrastructure would be great because we get access to much better housing, literally 3 times what a regular dwelling can give you, and we can be much more efficient with our food. We can create flour from wheat and then bread from that flour. We now have enough engineering XP, and I think what we're going to do with that is expand this town over here, and we're going to turn it into a farming town. Another thing that's important about middens is that I find they're not usually worked all that much. But middens are a combination of 2 things. One, it passively gives you 4 sanitation, but if you work it, then you also get 4 sanitation. This is something that kind of took me a while to realize, is that some things have 2 aspects. One from simply existing as an improvement, and a second one that you get from actually assigning a pop there. So for the time being, we have enough sanitation, but once we have maybe 1 more population, it would be a good idea to assign it and just lock it in there, you know, make sure that it stays in that one spot. I've just been building a couple of hunting camps over here so we can free up these units. I think I'm either gonna, you know, use them in the defense of our cities, or I'm just gonna send one down here for more elephants. Infrastructure is done. Perfect. We can do a couple things with that. First of all, we're going to get rid of both of these dwellings, and we're gonna replace those with a public housing, public quarters right there. And our next research can be, well, I guess maybe we should probably grab this, only because we want our scouts to be able to go on water. Here we go. Finally, a chaos event has fired. Fortunately, we have enough money to pay it off. It seems like this is one of the better events. The only thing that will happen is our midden will get raised. It doesn't even delete it, it just means we have to repair it, and that's fine. Compared to the numerous turns of gold we would have to pay, this is one of the better ones. So let's just go ahead and fix that. And yes, it looks like they have definitely built an army. They're probably planning to send it up north, so let's just protect these units by sending them back home. And maybe instead of attacking this army, although we definitely could, we have the power and would probably win. Well, you know, it's just 1 turn. We can, let's say, test the army on these units before we fight a real war. So they do have some ranged, but fortunately we only have one line unit, and they don't always prioritize the right units. Also, another thing that you might have noticed is that this unit is now routed. Both of these units, in fact, are routed. Earlier, I think I mentioned that they would surrender. I was wrong. They only surrender if they have nowhere else to go. But if you route units, what happens is you'll see they get pushed back a tile. So we went from here into this tile, we defeated them, crushed one unit, and routed the other two. So these now ran away, and they can't fight anymore. They've been routed. So they have to wait until, I think either they get home or they regenerate for a few turns, I'm not sure. But either way, they can't fight even if another army attacks them. Now, we certainly do have a lot of culture. I think what would be a good idea at this point is actually integrating another city. We're going to have to wait one more turn to integrate Dusseldorf, or we could go ahead and just integrate this city right now. And I think this wouldn't be a bad idea. Now we fully own this city completely, and we have a culture power ready, which we're going to use to build a town. I think here would be fine. This would give us access to, I think, the best possible farming town. So what we'll probably want to do, I think, is build a plantation here. And then because this is flax, what we can do is very easily build a press to turn that into food. If we wanted to, we could also decide to, grab more housing improvements, or meat generates extra food. That could be pretty decent. Eventually, making our bow hunters stronger would be perfect. It would put them, I think, on par with crossbows, actually. Taking everything into consideration, I think we're gonna wait for that. And as for the next technology, we'll go ahead with horses. It'll give us influence in all of our regions, allowing us to expand quicker, along with cavalry, which is a pretty decent unit. Egypt wants neutrality, and you know what? Yeah, we'll say okay for now, only because of the Americans. Right, of course, we can't forget we need to build some public quarters in this city as well. I guess we can just build that up here. And then if we want more food, it would actually be a really good idea. Because we have 2 wheat, we can build a mill anywhere we want to. I would say like over here, sure. That'll turn our 2 wheat, which was giving us 3 food, into 2 flour, which gives us 6 food each. And then we can build an oven later to turn that 2 flour into 2 bread. I hope you're starting to see the goods production chain and how that plays like a really big role in this game. And also why you need so much territory in your cities. It really is good to spread them out, make sure they have a lot of breathing room. Time to improve our bow hunters. They now have 18 attack and 16 defense. If we compare that to a regular crossbow that has 16 attack and 16 defense, it's pretty decent, especially for a cheaper unit. News from abroad, okay. Egypt and Greece are at war again. Oh my god, dude. Here we go. It's the Americans, as we predicted. Well, they did make it obvious with their threats. Fortunately, they arrived with 1 army, and both of our armies are stronger. What we're going to do is first attack here. If they get routed, they'll get pushed back to here, and these units will be able to clean them up. Looks like we're both going to take medium damage, which is not preferable, but it is preferable to getting our tiles raised. You saw what happened to this province when it was raised. We had to use additional improvement points to fix it back up, and also the enemy gets gold for raising stuff, meaning that the more they raise, the more money they can use to build more units faster. And also it just sucks for us. So even if we lose let's say maybe 1 unit here, I think that's okay. We took care of 1 unit, we routed 1 other unit, so here they are, they're still in that 1 spot. These guys are in a little bit of a precarious situation. 2 of them can't fight and they're quite low. Fortunately, we have the 2nd army here to clean them up. Notice how this 1 unit can't fight anymore. Well, now it's dead, but the archers will no longer be able to fight. Now, neither of their units can fight, meaning that they will get routed and pushed back into this tile. That's interesting. So they walked around and decided to raise this tile. It really is the only thing they could have done. They couldn't have retreated, so you know what? A valiant effort, I suppose. But yeah, we're gonna clean that up now. That was pretty easy. So that's 1 American army down. Here we go. Let's just clean up this army. It should be fairly simple. In fact, I might even move into here and then attack it here, because if it gets routed, it's going to move up north, and then either the city itself or this unit can finish it off. Although I have a feeling we're just going to destroy it entirely. There we go. So that's both of the American armies routed, and we're now on turn 75. Frankly, I think I've done enough yapping for one video, and hopefully I've given you a couple of tips you can use to start your own first game of Millennia. We covered settling cities, we covered supply chains, we covered innovation, we covered chaos, research, culture, domains, and specialization, different kinds of ages, although unfortunately we didn't get to pick one of the unique ages. The Age of Monuments is really fun. 1, if possible, I would definitely recommend going into it next. And even though the video is sponsored, I'm allowed to give my honest opinion on the game, so here it is. While there are a lot of things I would like to change, the combination of like unique city expansion, plus the way that the goods work, and the way that the different kind of ages work, and the ability to customize your nation thoroughly adds such a level of replayability that I've just been having a blast. Even though I've really only played the first maybe 5 or 6 ages about 3 different times independently, I can say absolutely each one of my runs, even those that I picked mound builders like twice, have been very unique. Because of course, it's not just about picking, we can pick Wild Hunters twice, but it's not just about picking Wild Hunters twice. You can also get innovations which uniquely empower those bow hunters or whatever kind of benefits you could get, right? So even if you play the exact same game twice, innovations are going to end up making it unique anyway. I feel like my 40 hours in the game over the course of less than a week should speak for itself. I've just been way too addicted to this game, and I think I'm gonna be playing it for a lot longer. And hopefully you will too. I think it's a good game. I think it has something of substance here. It feels like a unique experience from the other 4X games that I've played, although I would say there's a bit more of a learning curve. So after having played on Adept for most of a game, I would say for sure when you're starting off, play on the second difficulty. Even if you end up surpassing the AI very early on, I can say from experience, Adept can be pretty punishing if you don't have the knowledge that you need of even just like the basic things in the game. Take for example, if we were in Egypt's position right next to Greece, we would be super dead. And the AI is very war hungry. The game I played last night, I got declared on twice within the first couple of ages. First one, I was outmatched entirely, but sometimes the AI will declare war on you even if it's super one-sided in your favor. Maybe that can be tweaked. I think maybe it should be. Like for example, I have high confidence that the Americans would not be able to stop us if we just marched into Philadelphia. That's what I mean by the AI sometimes being more war hungry than they should be, is that they are a little bit overly aggressive. But for new players, that can be a bit overwhelming, so for sure, start with the second difficulty. That being said, that's pretty much everything I have to say about Millennia. I'm really excited to play more of this game. In fact, I haven't felt this excited to play a game since I started playing Europa Universalis 4 for the first time. And of course, that ended up becoming one of the main games I play on this channel. So if Millennia is popular enough, you might actually see a return of Millennia on this channel, maybe even several times. I am really enjoying the game, so hopefully you guys do too. But for now, this is Corbett, signing off, and as always, have a fantastic day. Thank you to all the patrons that help make this possible, including but not limited to Erica, The Quebecer, Nick Steffel, Qbrute, Quiet Guy, Sin Miss 077, Torvald, Ambient Cyan, James Levy, Luke78776, Robert Kaleno, Chewy Shoot, The Watcher, Brova, Robert, and Jamie.